Good morning, I'm Tonna Thomas. Coming up in the news at 6 for this morning, Thursday, November 5, 2020. Today could be the crucial day in the U.S. elections as officials indicate they expect to wrap up counting in the key state of Pennsylvania. Overnight, Democratic candidate Joe Biden holds a slight lead in Arizona and President Donald Trump continues to lead in Pennsylvania. Professor Basil Wilson says he hopes Trump will leave the White House gracefully if he loses the election to Biden. Jamaican journalist and member of the International Observer Group says she saw nothing fraudulent during Tuesday's vote in the U.S. In regional and international news, Hurricane Etta continues to spin across northern Nicaragua after lashing the country's Caribbean coast for much of Tuesday. In the sports report, Chris Williams appointed chairman of the new body that will oversee the running of the National Premier League. And in business this morning, First Rock Capital Holdings Limited posted net profit attributable to ordinary shareholders of $2.4 million. The details coming up next. Minister Andrew Holness says the government will need at least 6 months to purchase the tablets required to fill the need that exists among the country's students to facilitate access to online classes. The Prime Minister made the comment yesterday during a tablet distribution ceremony at the Drews Avenue Primary and Infant School in St. Andrew. He says tablets are now being sold at a higher cost due to an increase in demand for the devices across the region. More in this report from Stephen Simmons.
Prime Minister Holness acknowledged that the delay in the distribution of tablets has put many students across the island at a disadvantage.
Indeed, I did the research. It is not so much for a lack of budgetary allocation, though in Jamaica's case, it is the fact that our budget would not allow us to provide devices to everyone all at once. We must always remember that these devices have to be manufactured. So it will require us at least another 6 months before we are able to get all the supplies that we would need.
He's calling on parents who can afford tablets not to wait on the government to purchase the devices. And he's urging education stakeholders to provide the relevant information to those parents.
So that parents who will not wait on the government to get their own devices, that they are sufficiently informed. Let us provide the independent parent. The parent who is not going to sit at home and wait on the government to bring a device. They are going to go out on their own. That they are empowered consumers so that they know what to get for their students.
Prime Minister Holness urged government officials and agencies to be strategic in the implementation of the state-sponsored tablet program.
Today I'm going to charge e-learning, the Minister of Science, Energy and Technology, the Minister of Education, which I'm sure that we do have some of that already in place. But we have to be very strategic in how we provide these devices. Yes, we have had to be moving very quickly to have the devices in hand, but I want us to take some time to thoroughly research the specifications.
Stevie Simmons for Nationwide News.
National Security Minister Dr. Horace Chang is seeking to assure the nation that the police will once and for all dismantle the notorious Spanish Town-based Klansman gang. Dr. Chang notes there have been several violent incidents suspected to have been committed by members of the gang in St. Catherine recently. He says with the help of the states of emergency that was in place, the police had removed 60 members of the gang and have jailed over 50 of them. But the National Security Minister says there is still a significant number of gang members who are free.
On a regular basis now, they go after selected small cells, and they have been taking up a number of them. But so there are many of them, and it take a little time. But we can assure the country we're going to get all of them off the road. We're going to disrupt Klansmen, and not only Klansmen, but all of the gangs that are operating in that space. It is noticeable that between St. Catherine North and the Crescent downtown, the carpet area, which ranges from St. Andrew South to East Kingston, has been the center of most of our gang activity. Police is aware Bear in mind when you deal with young men who live in a community, it only takes one gun, 3 people to create mayhem.
He says that the police are actively pursuing the gangsters.
In fact, it is fair to say they have saved the lives of several gangsters in that area because of their capacity to stop the reprisal or intervene at critical times. There is a very extensive gang war proceeding in St. Catherine between different factions of the Klansman gang. There's the 2 major factions, the Black Man Tesha Miller grouping, and I gather since Tesha Miller got his conviction, there's a split in there in his camp, along with other supporting gangs in the region which are allying with different factions. So
He says the government is also reviewing the legal aspects of prolonged use of states of emergency. Minister Chang says in the meantime, the police are sustaining the use of zones of special operations and intelligence-led policing.
But the work goes on. The police is doing very good work now, and I can assure the country we'll bring them under control. The SO will make it faster, but at the rate we're going to get them down. Still going to get them down, even if the pace of reduction will be a little bit slower without the SOE.
Dr. Horace Chang, National Security Minister, addressing the media yesterday. And that wraps up the local segment. Up next, regional and international. In regional and international news this morning, beginning with regional news, Hurricane Etta continues to spin across northern Nicaragua after lashing the country's Caribbean coast for much of Tuesday. The storm isolated already remote communities and set off deadly landslides in 2 countries that killed at least 3 people. The storm had weakened by late Tuesday but was moving so slowly and dumping so much rain that much of Central America was on high alert. Etta came ashore Tuesday afternoon south of the Nicaraguan city of Bilwi as a powerful Category 4 hurricane after stalling just off the coast for hours. The city of about 60,000 had been without power since Monday evening. Corrugated metal roofing and uprooted trees were scattered through its streets. Some 20,000 of the area's residents were in shelters. The Cayman Islands' ability to regulate and attract individuals and entities in the virtual assets market has been strengthened with the recent commencement of legislation for virtual asset service providers. The country's virtual asset providers say they will also help Cayman comply with an important global review. A virtual asset is a digital representation of value that can be electronically traded and used for investment, such as cryptocurrency. The new rules are expected to boost business in the sector by allowing the supervision of businesses and help Cayman meet the latest recommendations from the Financial Action Task Force. In international news, there were more than 100,000 new cases of coronavirus in the U.S. on Wednesday, a record one-day increase. The figure reported by the COVID Tracking Project is accompanied by a steep rise in hospital admissions. That suggests that it is not solely due to increased testing. More than 1,100 deaths linked to coronavirus were recorded on Wednesday. The COVID crisis is being overshadowed by tensions over vote counting in the fraught aftermath of the U.S. election. More than 50,000 people across the U.S. are currently in hospital with coronavirus, an increase of about 64% from early October. Sarah McBride is to become the first transgender state senator in the U.S. after she won her race in Delaware. She beat Republican Steve Washington to take over the seat from Democrat Harris McDowell, who is standing down. Ms. McBride, 30, has worked as press secretary for LGBTQ advocacy group, the Human Rights Campaign, and was a trainee in President Obama's White House. Today could be the crucial day in the U.S. election as officials indicate they expect to wrap up the counting of ballots ahead of schedule in the key state of Pennsylvania. The vote count is continuing amid several legal challenges that have been mounted by the Donald Trump camp. Overnight, Democratic candidate Joe Biden holds a slight lead in Arizona. President Trump continues to lead in Pennsylvania. The ongoing counting in the U.S. has also led to a number of protests overnight in some states. More in this report. Mr. Biden continues to lead the Electoral College votes. Overnight, he remains at 253 Electoral College votes to Trump's 214. The final results hinges on the states of Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. ABC News has the latest key state breakdown.
Here's Pennsylvania, a must-win for Trump. His lead has been shrinking as more mail-in votes are counted in the urban areas. Let's take a look at Arizona now, where more results just came in overnight. Biden's lead has been shrinking even in the Phoenix area.
In Georgia, 3,000 votes per hour are being counted in Atlanta, a Democratic stronghold.
Now to Nevada, another nail-biter, but no new results overnight, and across the country, anxiety is growing.
As the ballots continue to be counted, there have been several counter-protests by Biden and Trump supporters.
Earlier, a peaceful crowd marched across a Portland overpass with a sign reading "Count every vote." In New York, at least 20 arrested after a large election protest in the city. In Las Vegas, Trump supporters holding a Stop the Steal rally.
We want a free, fair, and transparent election, and the Democrats are trying to steal it right out from underneath us.
And in Detroit, a Stop the Count protest. The crowd claiming the number of ballot watchers inside one counting location was insufficient.
But in Pennsylvania, the counting continues. The Secretary of State in Pennsylvania, Kathy Boockvar, says they could wrap up the count today ahead of schedule. Meanwhile, this morning, Mr. Biden is feeling confident he'll secure the presidency once every vote is counted.
Every vote must be counted. No one's going to take our democracy away from us. I know this won't be easy. I'm not naive, but I also know this as well. To make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as enemies. We are not enemies. What brings us together as Americans is so much stronger than anything that can tear us apart.
Both candidates are still on the pathway to 270 Electoral College votes. If Joe Biden holds the lead in Arizona and Nevada, he wins, and Pennsylvania won't matter. But for President Trump to win, he needs Pennsylvania plus a number of other states. Tonna Thomas for Nationwide News. In the meantime, Provost Emeritus of John Jay College in New York, Professor Basil Wilson, says he hopes U.S. President Donald Trump will leave the White House gracefully if he loses the election to his Democratic challenger, Joe Biden. Professor Wilson notes that President Trump's reaction to early voting numbers is an indicator that he will not accept losing to the former vice president.
Well, we're hoping that the president, who for 4 years has not behaved like a president, will eventually behave like a president and leave the White House without any rancor or without much mischief. It's quite clear that by tomorrow, when the Nevada votes come in and is declared, that Biden will have achieved 270 electoral votes.
Professor Basil Wilson, Provost Emeritus of John Jay College in New York. Meanwhile, Chairman Emeritus of the Young Republican National Federation, Jason Emmert, says he believes President Trump would leave the White House without any mischief if he loses the elections.
It's very narrow. He's going to have to do something very thread the needle here, and I don't see it happening. And I'm actually surprised the election is as close as it is. But he is going to leave. I mean, I don't think there's any worry about him staying in the White House. There's more money to be made, more opportunity for him, I think, a seat at the exit. And the U.S. is and remains the leader of the free world, and even more so now because our systems have proven they work. The institutions have held.
When asked if he supports President Trump's claims about voter fraud, Mr. Emmert says he believes the U.S. election was conducted fairly.
Well, I mean, there's no fraud that's taken place. I mean, I think that's. I think what you're hearing is someone who's obviously not going to go away quietly, but that doesn't mean he's not going to go away peacefully. It certainly hurts his brand if he just says, well, all the elections were fair and I got whipped because I was a failure as a president. That's not what his base wants to hear. That's not how he is as a person. It could be a model going forward, especially if we're going to rely more on mail-in votes, which I think is good for the country to continue having mail-in votes and higher participation.
Jason Emmert, Chairman Emeritus of the Young Republican National Federation. They were speaking last evening on Nationwide at 5 with Cliff Hughes and Tyrone Reed. Meanwhile, Jamaican journalist and member of the International Observer Group Democracy Wins, Janet Silvera, says she saw nothing fraudulent during Tuesday's vote in the U.S. Ms. Silvera visited the battleground state of Ohio to observe the U.S. election.
Not even when the computers went down in an area called Blacklick, which is one of the cities near to Columbus.
Yes.
And they had to stop using the computers for about an hour, and they started using paper. Not even then did I detect that there was any fraud or anybody trying to do anything outside of the ordinary, outside of the fact that the computers had gone down.
She says observing the U.S. presidential elections was enlightening.
It was a real eye-opener for me, Cliff. Nothing like we do in Jamaica, obviously. Not the kind of excitement that you would see on say, election day. But before election day, during the early voting, I went to one of the largest polling areas, Franklin County, which has about 800,000 voters.
Ms. Silvera is also hailing the preparation that went into the public awareness and education of voters ahead of the election during the pandemic.
They have a manual that's about maybe 150 pages that I got a copy of. And that manual gives you an idea of how you run an election. And they started their process long ago because of the pandemic. They knew what the challenges would be. So what they did was to start working towards November, start educating the people in the various communities, start working with the minorities, etc., to ensure that everything would run smoothly.
Janet Silvera, local journalist and a member of the Democracy Wins Observer Group, speaking last evening on Nationwide at 5 with Cliff Hughes and Tyrone Reed.